Hello, everybody. It's Chloe here. Oh, Thunderpaws wants to come hang out. Come on, Bubba. All right, I'm gonna keep one of my oracles in my hands as I talk about what's been going on. And the hot topic of the month has here in the U.S. has been the pro-life movement and conservative parties that are pushing for changes in legal status, or basically the laws of the different states to push and restrict, either ban, illegalize abortion, or restrict its usage amongst it was in the middle of May. It was about 3 states that had already taken some stances on that and try to put things into law, or the starting phases. And as I understand it, in order for these new legislation and laws or what have you, it's going to have to go be tested in the courts and maybe even go all the way up our judicial system through our government here in the United States. Now, I've tried several times to do a video on this, and I decided just to do a live one to get this out there and make it so I can't keep trying to do this topic, because literally it is preventing me from doing other content, from even doing any videos. This has been on my mind since mid-May, and I had already been dealing, if you've been following any of my videos, you know I've been dealing with basically balancing my energies and food issues, and daily life. It's technical. We all have challenges. It's okay. So as an earth spiritual person, I find the pro-life movement and the pro-choice, I think we have some common ground. I think it's just sticking points that are really getting to people. And I'm really sad that we would take options from women, or that banning or making illegal abortion would limit other options that are really reproductive health clinics and other services that tend to be connected to offering the service or the procedure of abortions. Or even with the pills, you can say that's kind of forced miscarriage or something along those lines. I think you can understand what I'm saying, that it's not just about abortion. I have a few different issues with what's going on. I've been watching, a lot of YouTube, I'm not a regular TV watcher. I usually don't like to spend a lot of time paying too much attention to the news. I already get dreams, either lucid dreaming or astral connections in my dreams when there are big events happening in the world that I need to pay attention to, or that for some reason it's on the consciousness of our planet. And so somehow I tap into that, and it's something that then I'm very aware of and can't avoid taking it in. Now, as a sensitive, I take in lots of different kinds of energies all the time, and I can tell you that taking in the energies of people who are victims of violence, be it sexual violence, all the way to full rape, or just beatings and other types of violence, is very weighing on the system, on the body. Of course, I would never compare it to the actual victim suffering, but it bothered me quite a bit how when the subject of how often a pregnancy happens due to rape, let alone just rape itself, they keep shooting out the percentage, 1% of the population, or 1% This is the part I'm not clear. I'm not sure if they're talking about 1% of just people get raped, or if they're more talking about 1% of rape victims get pregnant. Okay, so if we're taking a percentage of what is a much larger number, let's just say rape, and then we can kind of maybe have a more of a headspace of what that we're talking about. So if there is 1 to 5%, I don't know the exact figure, but I kept hearing 1% a lot and even a little bit higher. I wouldn't say more than 5%. Even if we just do 1% of the overall population is maybe faced or made a victim of a perpetrator of rape or sexual violence, and just that, let alone without possible pregnancy, that's still thousands and thousands of women out of a population of billions. Okay? When pro-lifers are like, "Ah, it's just 1%, you know, trying to devalue these people who are victims and make some kind of argument that that's not as big of a problem as the rest of this issue, um, that is connected to the service of doctors and clinics providing either a chemical forced miscarriage or a surgical abortion, right? Now, I find that very dismissive, very just a way to put aside an issue that they cannot easily deal with so that they can drive the point home for what they see as the bigger issue. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't feel comfortable leaving victims in the wind, so to speak. Especially now that through this last month, I have become more and more aware, especially the last 2 weeks, that there are courts that are giving joint custody to the rapists with their victim and that child that was sprung from their acts. Uh, it boggles my mind. We're supposed to be protecting the victim and the child from a violent or sexual predator, and now you're giving him joint custody with the rights to visit and pay child support and all this other stuff. That makes no sense whatsoever. And that is one reason on several that I can't, unfortunately, side with pro-lifers. Now, let me do an opposite thing, okay, that I do have in common with pro-lifers. Maybe even just anybody who is facing the different time periods in which we have, early, what I call forced miscarriage, early abortions, which are really just a pill you take that induces a miscarriage, right? All the way through to what now, different stages, what leads from a chemical abortion, a surgical abortion, and so on. Now, like anybody else, or like many people, I agree that if there's a medical issue, we should allow or have an exception for the mothers who may be in danger due to pregnancy. So that would be the medical exception, right? And then we have women. I didn't even know this was a thing, really, and it is a little disturbing to me that we have they do actual late term abortions all the way up within close to birth. Like, in my understanding this, all the way up close to birth. I am very uncomfortable with that. At that point, why are we not in that late third trimester, wherever phase of that you're facing this decision? Why are we not inducing the pregnancy and seeing if the child can survive being born early? That seems, I do not want to put my morality onto a woman facing these hard decisions. And that's an even greater part of this for me. even if I do not choose to access the procedure, the method of abortion, whatever kind, for myself and my family, I do not feel that I have the right to make these choices for other people. I feel that legal, safe options should be available, but I am uncomfortable with late term abortion because at that point, it isn't just a fetus, it isn't just a clump of cells, it isn't any of these terms that I've heard on either side. It is a living being. And let me back up even a little bit further here on the subject of whether or not when a egg, zygote, fetus, blah blah blah, when is it a baby? It's a baby through the whole thing. A pregnancy is a pregnancy. um, there is a really cool channel called Haven, I think it's called Haven's Craft or Haven's Coven. They did a really great video reading sacred text, which talks about, oh my gosh, there's references in these sacred texts from Bibles to Hermetics to other things, other sacred books or guidelines amongst different spiritual traditions and religions around our globe that have references everything from when you can feel life within the mother, when, and I think that was supposed to be an argument for when is a pregnancy a baby or something. And then were others where there were actually in the sacred text writings of how to do a forced miscarriage or what we now call abortion. Now, I can't say what stage they're talking about. I think this is just when there is awareness that the woman is pregnant and they had certain methods for dealing with it. And a lot of it was written for if there was adultery mixed in, like if the male suspected he wasn't the father, and there were certain methods in place to deal with the situation. So this isn't like it's a new subject. It isn't like this is a modern situation. And I understand that we have a better more information, a better understanding of the processes of pregnancy and fetal development. But as an earth spiritual person, for me, I feel as a responsible pregnant, even though I acknowledge that life is life, it is a baby from when it's finally attached to the uterus, as far as I'm concerned. I feel that a woman should be given at least a few weeks after she is aware that she's pregnant to make whatever choice she needs to make for the good of her current family or her life situation to be of the best care of herself and everybody involved. I don't feel that we should be taking options from people when we do not have good enough punishments for sexual, physical violent offenders who have been convicted, including full rape convictions, like rapists who have been found without a doubt to be perpetrators. In these cases, I think we should go as far as to take away their reproductive ability. I don't see why we would allow people like that to have the ability to impregnate other people if they can't seem to control their urges. It would make, I mean, that will have to be debated, but if we went as far as to have true consequences for these sexual predators, then they would most likely think third, fourth, or fifth, they'd think about it a bit more before they acted on said um, uh, actions and instincts, because most people will try to preserve themselves. Now, if they can't, then at least should something happen, they don't continue to victimize the victim by having the person who's able to get pregnant be continually reminded, because if it's a violent rape or however it is, however it affects the person, that this could be a continual, post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety. There are stress chemical hormones that will continue further on that can cause, it's even medically proven, problems with the fetus, with the baby, even until after birth and continuing on through life, depending on the biology of the woman and what kind of offspring she would have. So, some with sensitive nature, some with very healthy balance in their bodies. It would be variable. And because it's so variable and we cannot possibly know for sure the outcomes, we need to allow the mother and those involved to make the decisions for themselves. Okay. Now, I don't know what to do about men's rights as the father. I don't have an easy answer for that, and I don't claim to know everything. I just feel that just with talking about a few things that we've talked about, that I've talked about in the last few minutes, you can see this is very complex and there's so many layers. And just taking one option that actually, I hate to say it, somewhat levels the playing field when it comes to options women have versus men, because men don't have to carry the baby. Men are not the vessel that you know has to literally, in some cases, stop different aspects of their life in order to take care of and go through the pregnancy for this child. It interrupts financial stability. It interrupts educational goals. It interrupts so many different things. Even though it can be a beautiful thing, even though bringing a new member into the family, the baby into life, can be a beautiful thing. In some instances, women are just not able or ready to have that responsibility or move forward. Now, again, I because I do not want to push my beliefs on other women. I'm just saying having the process available, the method, the procedure, what have you, does not mean we're pushing our morality or allowing some kind of questionable morality onto others. Now, we know that the conservative set are most of the people who are pro-lifers. And because of that, that's saying, I feel it's not permissible when we have, I've heard the statistics several times from several different sources that around 59% of our voting populace is for keeping abortion legal. And yet we're allowing our minority, most conservative groups to affect the laws for the overall populace who don't even believe in this. And man, we could get into an overall discussion of how that is very complex and why we have so many complex feelings and attitudes about Trump being in office. But that's not what I want to do. That's just like an overall overshadowing of a much larger picture than the subject at hand. I will be quite frank. When people say, now I'm trying to figure out how to say this in a very succinct way. I feel that as a victim of child molestation and beatings as a child, and both of the separate situations I was in were done by Christian people. That's not to say all Christians are violent or predators. I know that's within many different faiths and communities. I'm just saying that you cannot guarantee someone that should they make a decision not to have an abortion, that child, if they feel they cannot keep it and they want to put it up for adoption or allow the system to help take over if they are forced to have the pregnancy, you cannot guarantee that child will be in a safe situation. And making it so that a mother, even to that unborn child, whatever choice she feels she needs to make, does not have a avenue to make all in any choice that she needs to make, is frankly definitely putting our moralities onto these individual women and families. And I am not comfortable with that. Even though I personally would choose not to do an abortion, except for in a couple different situations myself, because I am a woman with anxiety. I have had post-traumatic stress syndrome. I have panic disorder. I have two very healthy children. One does have anxiety disorder, and the other one has a little ADHD, but overall, he's a pretty happy kid. But I'm just saying, you don't know how these things are going to develop, the children, the families. You don't know the burdens that the mothers have to deal with. And until we come up with very effective legal ways to deal with violent perpetrators of rape and sexual assault, until we have ways to help women that are actually effective and put into practice, and they're not just like talked about, um, that we have, whether it's government funded or private communities helping their fellow women of their communities deal with these intense, very heartbreaking decisions, or very, happy decisions, depending on their own emotional ability and want and their own morality. We should not be outlawing procedures that are needed, at least for now, because there is a permissive quality of our culture that allows men and women to be very biased against people who are sexually active, or let's just say, well, for example, maybe to clarify what I'm talking about, when we talk about a guy who's masculine and strong, and we perceive him as a player, and we have all these kind of macho titles that we share about him, but for the same behavior, a woman does something similar and she's called a hoe, a harlot, all these other different, a slut, all these different terms that we have, and one's very degrading and one's very uplifting for the other sex. I don't feel that we have an even playing field. Let's also talk about the fact that we have more chemical and physical products of contraception for women than men, and yet men are fertile all the time, and women are only fertile for a part of the month, and their fertility only lasts for around 50 years, 45 to 50 years, something like that, give or take, according to the patterns within the biology of the female's family, right? So when you take a male who's fertile all the time, from the time he starts producing sperm up into the almost death, um, and he can get a woman pregnant, and not only can he get a woman pregnant, he can get multiple women pregnant. Why are we not pushing for contraceptions of the male so they can take a greater responsibility on the situation and not leave it all on the backs or bodies of the women who carry the burden of carrying life for our people? I feel that these things need to be dealt with, and if these issues are dealt with, then we can talk about uh, limiting the access and use of the procedure of abortion. Now, one other thing happened that I was quite upset about, that I had viewed on a YouTube video that actually was a copy from a newscast thing. There was a witness in front of a government body, a legislative body on the East Coast, for some state legislation to either ban or illegalize abortion versus keeping it in law, to have safe and procedures. And one of these witnesses shared pictures of a aborted baby, and this was a later stage abortion, so it wasn't just a chemical abortion, which would have been, very small, maybe not even seen much, but it was like pieces of a baby, right? And one of the statements this witness made, was that we wouldn't do this to animals. Why would we do this to human babies and their mothers? Well, that's quite frankly a lie. We do this to animals. When we go to have our cats and dogs neutered or spayed, I guess we're talking about the females, so whatever the term is for the females to be fixed. Sometimes they're pregnant when they're brought in, and if it's found that they're pregnant, and this is something that can easily be avoided by ultrasound real quick to make sure the cat is pregnant or not, or even feeling for it in later stage pregnancies, right? And then you could, right then and there, if they detect a pregnancy, decide, oh, this can't happen right now. The cat is pregnant and at whatever stage, and we need to let her finish her pregnancy, right? Oh, I agree. Yes, I agree, Mystic. I'm not sure how to say that first name, so I'm just going to call you Mystic. But let me just be clear on this point. We do this to animals. What we're talking about, how this woman phrased, we wouldn't do this. We do. We make the decision to end that cat's or dog's pregnancy without their permission, and then we fix them and take away their rights of having babies. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, that's an animal and I'm a human. Well, we are mammals too, and we are animals too. And the difference is that we have the physical means of doing these processes to other animals and plants or what have you. We hold ourselves. Oh, Sa4e. Okay. I'm really bad with names, so but thank you. Sa4e. Satori. I get it. Okay, Satori. Cool. Um, so when that witness stated that we wouldn't do this to other animals, why would we do it to our babies, to human babies and their mothers? That was a complete lie. And I find it very interesting. Actually, I kind of applaud the pro-lifers for having such eloquent debaters. And I'm not talking about that witness, but there's been some other people that I've seen who are very eloquent debaters, are very good and very smooth at kind of answering a question without actually answering the specific points of a question, so that people feel as if they are getting some like a answer. There was this guy, I think he lives in Utah, I'm not sure, but he's a very conservative pro-lifer, and he's pretty well known. I don't want to say his name wrong. I had the video open a couple times when I tried to do a video on this topic before. And basically, there was a young, I guess, maybe pro-choice young male, or maybe he was just a male, having questions for the pro-life party. And one of them was, is it accept? I'm not even sure I'm going to say it exactly right, but basically, he wanted to know the pro-lifers' view on, was it acceptable, the loss of life of women in pursuing illegal, what would be illegal abortions? Is that life acceptable? Is the loss of those lives acceptable? Now, the way the guy answered was more like, we will save more lives by making abortion illegal. And he talks about the unborn lives. He didn't even address the lives of these women who would be risking their lives, let alone the families that would be, losing a family member plus the unborn child and all the repercussions that could have. He said it very smoothly. He kind of sidestepped the actual question and just went to the whole, making abortion illegal will save far more lives. And that basically, yes, he was very happy to accept that outcome without taking in the, let's use percentages per se, the small percentage of women who might die or who might, have very dangerous health issues, what have you, the side effects that would be for the mothers and the unborn that we lose to making abortion illegal. All right. I was not happy about that, and I've seen them do this over and over again, and I find that pro-choice people get so heated over this that they have a hard time verbalizing their point of views, or they get stuck on certain issues. Like, we've been taught that women have a right to their own bodies, and that it is their reproductive right to do what they feel is right for them and their family. We've been taught that, but you know what? That's been pushed the most since Roe versus Wade. And that is their whole point, that they want that reevaluated and to have new guidelines with the new supposedly scientific evidence that has been found and developed within the medical field since the time of Roe versus Wade was put in acts. It was put in law, I guess. Now, I can see maybe reevaluating it. Again, I admit that I am uncomfortable with late-term abortion, which I don't even understand how you could consider that at, the last few weeks of going to have the babies. At that point, induce the baby, get it out of the mother's body, and care for the baby, and let her make the choices she will if she really feels she can't keep that child. Believe me, I'm only uncomfortable with it because we know by then that child now recognizes the voices of the people around them outside the womb. There is a consciousness at that point, as far as I'm concerned. There's already associations in that baby's mind, and it's different. It's just completely different. Again, I can't choose for these people what they do, or just I can only choose for my own self and my own family. And that's what I think pro-lifers really need to think about. Now, if you're a conservative person and maybe you aren't a Christian one, maybe you're or spiritual like me or some variation of it, and you live by the and harm none, do what you will. And that's a very hard one to live by, because even just cleaning a windshield can kill a bunch of bugs and other things, right? But we make these moral choices on what levels of harm are acceptable in all these situations. But you know what? We individually have to make those choices. We can't put those choices on other people. Um, and that's why I think the term murder is way too strong. Yes, there is no one who does not know that this is a heartbreaking decision for those women who choose that that is the, or have come to a place where they feel that it is the only option for them at that point in time. Um, when we put in services and make things easier for them to not choose abortion, to have legal backup for them, that actually protects them in the case of rape and sexual violence, or when it's a relative, that kind of thing. I can't think of the term right now, it just slipped my mind. Having things in place for them, then we could maybe revisit this. But I think it's highly morally ambiguous to try to put this in action when we don't have firm laws and very heavy penalties, um, deterrents in that way to encourage better behavior from people. And it isn't even just those of the more violent type, which again, I already spoke of how that 1% is a far larger number of people than say 50 people. It's like thousands and thousands of women who are facing this situation, right? Um, and I'm not talking about abortion itself here. I mean the subset of people who have been victims of rape and sexual violence, who are able to have children. And I do not even question the sexuality of people because I don't know the current terms that well, but basically I'm going to say a hermaphrodite, or what I feel are the middle sex, because they kind of have both, and maybe they have the female organs healthy and large enough to be able to carry a baby, as well as the opposite within their bodies. And that means that there are, and also let's uh, be real. There are children who get pregnant, there are teenagers who get pregnant, and there are adult women who get pregnant. Females, if you're just going to keep it to that. And so, because of those things, it is highly, um, I do not feel right about forcing a child to have a baby, especially if they can't mentally handle it. It's very complex. So knowing these things, I really encourage people to, even if you wouldn't choose this for yourself, don't take away options from others due to your own morality. Okay. I feel that you can choose not to participate. You can choose to educate and make sure everybody is aware of every option they have at every step of the way, so that we can make the choice whether or not to participate in using certain procedures or contraceptions, and make sure that that men have equal options of contraception, so that it isn't all on the woman, because that is highly morally ambiguous as well, and calls to question why is it mostly men in office? Why are there not more representations of women who are half of the species and who carry, you guys? We are the ones that carry the risk. Having a baby does not put a man's life at risk. Okay, having a baby for a male, um, even though it can affect some of their financial situation, does not affect them as highly financially as it does women. And when I hear people are saying, well, that's why we have child support, not everybody pays child support. Uh, you you cannot guarantee that. As much as it is an ideal situation that that system is placed, it doesn't always go through the way it's supposed to. And a lot of people use it as a manipulation point of dealing with the other parent in the relationship. There's so many factors. So, okay, I've been on my soapbox long enough. I don't really want to go much further. Oh, there was one other thing, and not everybody's going to agree that this should be part of the conversation, and that's fine. But as an earth spiritual person, I question the morality of people who eat um, babies of other animals, basically. And this comes up for me because we talked about how we wouldn't treat human mothers and their babies the way we would treat animals, right? So the idea of, say, in particular, one of the biggest ones for me is the idea of eating a calf. We have these cows that produce milk. We take the baby away from the cow right away so that all the milk is for our populace. They don't get to feed the baby the milk that was literally made for the baby cow. And then in some instances, and I know that not all cattle farms are this way, but those that are producing milk usually do separate the babies from the mothers. Those that are more for meat stock are allowed to stay together, as I understand it. But those babies from the producing milk producers are kept in crates. They are not allowed to run around and grow and have a happy life up until the point where they're going to be killed for food. They are kept in crates to keep them tender or what have you. And then they are killed as children, as babies, not too far down the road. And that is veal, folks. That is your delicacy that you're eating. And I am highly uncomfortable with that. That's the that also brings to mind, and I don't know why, but it makes me jump to what we do with our young male babies of circumcision, which is painful. It's funny that we will argue whether or not a life is a life or a baby is a baby. And then we point out how they react if you try to go in there to end their life within the womb, that they react to the pain and try to get away from this intruding thing that is risking their life. But then we say, oh, the baby doesn't feel it when you circumcise them. It's a non-painful procedure. And yet men later, when they have this procedure, will tell you it is very painful. It the argument is maybe the baby's penis doesn't feel as much as a further grown along penis. I don't think so. I think you can't subjectively or situationally use morality when it suits you. There has to be some kind of consistency amongst this. So if you're going to be a pro-lifer and say that you're for the rights of the unborn and for the living or what have you, then you have to be consistent. And for those pro-lifers who are of a more conservative Christian spirituality or any of the one book faiths that are pushing these laws due to your faith, let alone even though you're saying you're doing it according to the science, I can tell that that isn't exactly true, because I've heard within 2 minutes or less of the same conversation or debate, people saying in one breath that they want to follow the science, even though they're trying to leave their Bible out of it. Then in that same conversation, they say, this is a sinful culture. This is a sinful act. This is a something of sin. You can't say you're leaving the Bible out of it and then use your spiritual morale language in the same conversation. If you're truly going by the science, you have to leave that out the door. So please have consistency when pursuing your political goals here. All right, I've said enough. There's a lot of levels to all this, and I'm fine with if people want to comment in the sections, as long as people are respectful to each other. There was a few other points I had, but I feel like this is just too long now, and I hope that perhaps we can have a conversation about this without name calling or derogatory terms or anything like that, because that is not my intent. I know some very loving, happy, spiritual people of many different sects and spirituality, and that isn't my issue here. It's just that, again, I think we should be able to agree to disagree, and until services are put in place that make it so abortion isn't a needed process, then we can readdress this and not put the cart before the horse, so to speak. Okay, so thank you for your time. Please thumbs up or thumbs down. That's totally cool with me. And yeah, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.